Welcome to class. We're starting to talk about the Russian urban system. This is the beginning of chapter 3. We are looking today at Veliki Novgorod. Veliki Novgorod is one of the oldest cities in Russia. And I'm going to show you a few images of the city. So this is one side of the river, and this is the other side of the river. And the city is located on both sides. And there you can see both sides simultaneously, side by side. You'll notice that there's a wall all around the city. This is a defensive wall. We talked about this with our Roman cities. You see the same thing here. This is where Veliki Novgorod is located, and you can see it is between Moscow and St. Petersburg, and it's sitting right on a lake. That's Lake Ilmen. This is the Volkhov River. Now this is an image of Rurik. Rurik is the Viking chief who is believed to have founded Veliki Novgorod. So Veliki Novgorod was founded by Rurik. He is a Viking who came down to Russia and established the city. This is Oleg of Novgorod. He was the direct descendant of Rurik. So when Rurik died, Oleg took over. This is what the area looked like when Veliki Novgorod was established. So you had Slavonic tribes in this region, and the Vikings came from the north and established Veliki Novgorod in this region. Veliki Novgorod, as you can see, is part of a system called Kievan Rus. Kievan Rus is the first East Slavic state to emerge in this area, and Veliki Novgorod was the capital of Kievan Rus. So it was the Vikings coming from this area, they came from the Baltic, who established Veliki Novgorod right here. So Rurik was elected the ruler of Novgorod in 860, and then he went on to Kiev, which is down here. Kievan Rus, the state of Kievan Rus, controlled the trade of furs, wax, and slaves between the Scandinavian Empire to the north and the Byzantine Empire to the south here. And there you can see on this map the extent of Kievan Rus between 862 and 912. So here you see the Vikings leaving this area and going out and establishing Veliki Novgorod here. This is Kievan Rus in its beginnings. And you can see again the Byzantine Empire to the south. Now, Oleg, if you'll remember, he's the direct descendant of Rurik, became so powerful that he actually took over the city of Constantinople which was part of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople's down here. So Oleg took over Constantinople, and here you see an image of Oleg's shield being fixed to the gates of Constantinople in a show of his power. Now, Constantinople fought back eventually, but the fact that Oleg became so powerful as to take over such a large city indicates the strength that he had gained at this time. Now, we had talked about the Hanseatic League last class. This was the League of Traders throughout Europe. And as you can see from this map, the easternmost extent of the Hanseatic League is Veliki Novgorod. So the Hanseatic League goes they traveled all throughout Europe and all the way into Russia. And Veliki Novgorod was actually the easternmost outpost of the Hanseatic League. So again, they were trading things like fur, wax, and slaves between the Scandinavian and the Byzantine Empire. Kievan Rus adopted Christianity around 988, and this is an image of the baptism of the Prince Vladimir. He linked the church with the state. So prior to this, the state was separate from the church, but once Prince Vladimir was baptized, the Christianization of Kievan Rus begins. Here you can see Veliki Novgorod depicted with the outer walls that I showed you, and this word detinets represents these structures here. Now, what do you think those are? Well, those are also for defense, for defensive purposes, right? So these are forts or lookouts all around the wall. This is the other side of the river. So before they had permanent bridges, these two sides of the river would have been separated. And this is what's called the market side, and you've seen an image of this. This area is called Yaroslav's courtyard. Now, Veliki Novgorod is a fascinating city because of many reasons, not only because it's one of the oldest cities, but also because it's one of the few cities that actually has some archaeological evidence that is preserved from so long ago. In 1034, there was a school founded for 300 students by Yaroslav the Wise. Now, Yaroslav the Wise founded the school in 1034 at a time when throughout most of the world, very few people were actually reading and writing. Very few people were able to read and write. So the fact that there were 300 students able to attend the school shows you how unique this city is, because you had so many literate people coming out of this school. And that meant that the population, most of the population, could read and write, which is unlike any other city during the Middle Ages. This is an example of a document, and you can see that it would have taken a lot of time and effort to produce something like this. This is another document. This was something that was copied for a mayor. This is Saint Sophia one of the oldest structures in Russia. It was built between 1045 and 1050. Most of it is still original. This dome was replaced. Part of the back had burned down and was rebuilt, but most of it is still original. And you can see what it looks like a little close up there. Now, in 1136, something really interesting happens. Prince Vezivod is dismissed. Have you ever heard of a prince being dismissed? This is an unusual thing that happens in Veliki Novgorod. They get together, they have what's called a vechi, or a folk gathering, and they dismissed their prince. And then this creates what's called the city-state of Novgorod, because now Novgorod is independent from Kievan Rus at this point. So the city-state of Novgorod is created as Prince Vezivod is dismissed in 1136. These are some letters that were found. Like I said, most of the population could read and write, and this was very unusual. So because this site was excavated, they found letters that were written by ordinary folk. And we got to learn about their lives. You can see this script is not legible to us, but we can learn about the lives of ordinary people from these birch bark letters that were preserved archaeologically. And part of the reason why they were preserved was because the area was really, really swampy. So within Novgorod, you couldn't really grow anything agriculturally. It was a marginal area. They only grew things like hemp, which you can't use for consumption purposes. And that's part of the reason why they became such good traders, because they could not practice agriculture in their area. So they had to rely on trade very heavily. And it was very important to the growth of the city. Okay, this is an old map of the Hanseatic League. I will show you. So again, the Hanseatic League, if you follow this within the North Sea they traveled all the way from here, going all the way, oops, let's go back, going all the way up here to Novgorod. So they're already by 1400, Novgorod was part of the Hanseatic League. It was originally known as the Hansa, and eventually it becomes the Hanseatic League. This is a wooden tablet from Novgorod from the 11th century. This is the kind of thing that would allow that script to be read. So this wooden tablet would have allowed archaeologists to then be able to read what was written on those birch bark letters. This is an angel with golden locks. It's a 12th century icon. It looks very much like frescoes that were painted on the inside, or murals that were painted on the inside of Eastern Orthodox churches all across Europe. And the red pigment that you see depicted in this is what is called Novgorod red, because it comes from Novgorod. And this red pigment made its way not only throughout Russia, but also throughout Europe. We see these kind of images all the way in Europe, even in Greece, etc. These Eastern Orthodox images with the Novgorod red appear all over. And so that shows us the extent to which Novgorod was trading all the way back in the 12th century. This is an instrument known as the guzli. These are some of the artifacts that were recovered when Novgorod was excavated. And you can see there's some amber here, a little wooden horse, comb, some jewelry. The guzli is an instrument that was played, and poetry was recited to the guzli that's called biliny, and that's spelled B-Y-L-I-N-Y. So the guzli was used and to play songs that were these epic poems called biliny. And one of the poems is about Sadko, a merchant from Novgorod. He's a character in Russian folklore. And there's a story of Sadko. So Sadko one day was sitting on the shores of Lake Ilmen playing his guzli, and there are variations on the story, but essentially the Lake Ilmen is pleased with Sadko's playing, and he says, Sadko, you can come down to the bottom of the lake and select a mermaid of your choice. And that is what happens. Okay, let's back up a little bit here.